Welcome to Something More to Podcast, where we move through topics wherever the conversation takes us. I'm your host, Adam Culbertson.
And I'm Richard Collins. Today, we want to get kind of into a rather deep topic here. It's a little different than what we normally do. A lot of what we do is a little more like current events based.
Yeah.
Like even when we're not talking about current events, we tend to talk about things that are kind of tied to current events.
Mm-hmm.
This is a little more avant-garde, let's say. Deep Thoughts by Jack Handey. So the question today is there really such a thing as free will? I mean, you like to think that you have free will. You like to think, oh, well, you know, I decided to do this because it was my choice. It was my decision. Like nobody told me to what to do or what to think. Like I came up with this all on my own. And while that is most definitely true, maybe not always, but in most cases that's true. Do you really have any free will, or is everything that you think and everything that you do simply an effect of some earlier cause?
Yeah. I came across something not too long ago that was talking about it and like something like, oh, well, you have the free will to do the things that you like doing and stuff like that. But like, do you really like you gotta, like, you might like your job, but like, do you really want to be going to work and stuff like that? No, you have to go to work because you need money to do leisure activities and stuff. I don't know. I just,
well, I mean, and that's definitely one aspect of it. I mean, for most people, I would say that, you know, left to their own devices, if they didn't absolutely have to do whatever job they're doing to be able to live, they would be doing something else entirely. And I'm not saying everybody would just be lazy and sit around and do nothing all day.
Oh, no.
But, I mean, they would probably be doing something else with their time than whatever their current job is. There are some lucky few that whatever it is they're doing for a living is actually what they want to be doing. But ultimately, most of us aren't that lucky.
Yeah.
But it can go even deeper than that. Like, to the point where like your experiences and your genetics, like even influence the way that you think, like the things that you think, the way you think about certain things, the foods that you like or dislike, like all of those things are influenced by your experiences and your genetics.
Mm-hmm. Now I'm sure like, on the nurture side of things, the way you're raised and everything as well.
Oh, absolutely. Like that's kind of like, what I'm including in experiences.
I got you.
Like, you know, the things that happened to you, the way that you were brought up, like, you know, the things that you were told, like, you know, what you might have even been thinking about when you were told something. Like you might be more or less receptive to something somebody's telling you, depending on your mindset at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But as crazy as it is to think about, there's a cause and effect to absolutely everything. And it would be so ridiculously complicated to be able to follow this whole chain of events for somebody's life. But theoretically, if you knew every single detail of everything that was happening surrounding a person, you could predict every single thing that was ever going to happen to them. It would be completely infeasible for a person to do that.
Yeah.
Hell, it would be infeasible for like the most advanced supercomputers we've imagined up to this point to do that. But in theory, like all of those things are there. Like all of the causes are lined up. All of the effects are just what happens because of them. And so in a way, like everything that you ever do or ever say is going to be predetermined in a way. Not necessarily predetermined, but it is a result of everything else that's come before.
Yeah. Yeah. And like that kind of gets me on like the whole thing that some people believe that there's multiple timelines and stuff like that, and then based on your choices is where the timeline split and everything like that. Like I think that you're going to make the choices no matter what, because of the choices that you've made in the past or the choices that people made around you.
Absolutely.
Like you're not going to make a different choice.
Like you made the choice because you are you. Like no matter how many times that you in that same situation is given the choice, like you would always decide the same thing because all the parameters are the same. Now, not to say that if you were posed the same situation a different time in your life that you wouldn't decide something different.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I mean, like people are fluid. Like their minds are changing and altering and evolving. Like in a not in a literal sense, but more of a metaphorical sense.
I got you.
But because I mean, you're constantly having new influences on yourself, like new things that happen.
Oh yeah,
things that change the way that you think. And even when you think about the most stubborn-headed person that won't change their mind for anything, like in some small way, like there's things changing within their head that you just can't even know.
Yeah.
That they probably don't even know.
No.
I mean, there are so many processes that go through your brain that you're not even privy to.
Yeah. I mean, there's like a big thing that comes to mind for me that drives a lot of my choices and everything is fear.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. That's a big driving factor for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I would dare say everyone at some point.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, sadly, fear drives a lot of my choices.
And it doesn't even necessarily have to be like some primal fear. Like even some kind of like, oh, well, what if this happens? Like, well, I don't really want to get this because what if I don't have enough money later on in the week?
Yeah.
Like in a way, like that's a form of fear.
It is, yeah.
Like it's a form of worry, concern, like
fear of stress and and dealing with that.
Right.
Yeah, I think mine's mostly like delusions, hallucinations, kind of stuff, anxiety, everything like that. Which, I mean, again, I don't have any control over that.
Right.
I try to have as much control as possible, but I mean, really, how much control does anybody have over anything they're thinking or doing or whatever?
And that's the other thing. Like, granted, it's good for you to maybe even have the illusion of control at some points, because being able to just tell yourself, like in your mind, that you have control of a situation, like that in and of itself, while coming from something else, like, I don't know, maybe you were listening to some kind of self-help thing and they were like, you should tell yourself that this thing is going to happen and not be so doubtful about it. But, that's, again, that cause and effect. You hear that, so you start thinking about that kind of thing. And that kind of thought process, like, leads you into more positive thought, which can actually, like, dictate a lot of things down the line for you, like in the terms of how you perceive things. And, how you perceive things can alter a lot of things about your decisions or the things you do and say. And hell, even me just talking about this could spark that chain reaction in people.
That brings something else that, like, when I quit smoking cigarettes, I had read something that, like, you can convince yourself. Like, you can convince your mind to believe something if you constantly think about it, something like that. I don't think that can apply to everything. I don't know. It worked for me.
It can apply pretty broadly.
But I did that, and I constantly, every time I wanted a cigarette, I was telling myself, it tastes nasty, it's disgusting, it's making me sick. Like, that's what I was constantly telling myself. And it got to the point that, like, every time that I was smoking a cigarette, it was tasted nasty. I just couldn't. And I loved smoking, like, it as most smokers would be able to relate to. Like when you wake up and you have your first cigarette, like, it's the most, like, delicious thing of the day, because you're getting that nicotine fix and everything, and just like the lighting it, the first puff, everything.
Right.
I went from that to, oh, this is disgusting. And like, it slowly, I was not able to finish a whole cigarette. And then to the point that I just woke up one morning, I lit one up, I took one puff, and I was like, oh, this is disgusting. I put it out, never touched a cigarette again. And that was just from me telling myself. And
Yeah.
I mean,
and you know, I want to point out like two things, like kind of related to what you were just saying, concerning like psychology and like, you know, actual science behind all of this, like things that people have studied and figured. Is one, like that method that you were using to quit, is very similar to the idea of aversion therapy. Like the idea of associating something that you're trying to avoid, something you're trying to quit, like a habit you're trying to get rid of, with something negative, so that whenever you think about it, you have that negative thought, like, you know, a disgusting taste or something like that. So eventually you just don't want to do it anymore because you associate it with something negative.
yeah, I guess that's what I did.
Now, in a lot of cases, aversion therapy, and especially in more, I guess, brutish times in psychological treatment, was often doing things like shock treatment, where, you know, when you did something against what you were supposed to be doing, they would give you a shock. I mean, it is a form of aversion therapy.
Yeah. I remember they did that on season 2 of American Horror Story, in the insane asylum.
Right. And I mean,
It was terrible. Fucked up.
It's a horrible thing. It's not humane in any way, shape, or form, but that's kind of the basic idea behind it. That's where that kind of thing comes from.
Yeah.
There are much more effective ways of doing it, like what you were saying, is just kind of associating that negative thought with the action.
Yeah.
And the other thing, on topics like this, my mind just ends up going in so many different directions.
Yeah, that's fine.
I have to backtrack to get to where I was going. Anyway, let me think. You were talking about like the whole quitting smoking thing. The other thing, like the large reason, like one of the biggest motivators that most people are not even aware of going on, and really the main reason why addiction exists, like the main reason why you do the things that you like doing, is dopamine. It's this chemical released in your brain that basically rewards you for doing something that your brain thinks is the right thing to do or a good thing to do.
Yeah.
So, you know, whenever you get addicted, you get into this kind of loop. And I mean, there are even a lot of addictions that don't really have any substance in and of itself that causes like a physical need for it, you know, like a lot of drugs or nicotine can do. But you can still be addicted to something by just the dopamine release.
Oh yeah. Oh
like,
yeah.
You do something, you get that hit of dopamine. It feels really good. Your brain is happy. Your brain's like, yeah, this is definitely what we should be doing.
Yeah.
And it's hard to break out of that because your brain starts wanting more of that dopamine. And so you need to do, and, you know, again, a lot like actual addictive, physically addictive substances, like your brain wants more and more of the dopamine because it doesn't have as much effect when you get it as often.
Mm-hmm.
So it starts reaching a point where you're doing that thing more and more and more to try and get the same kind of dopamine effect.
Yeah. You completely lose your free will.
Not that you had it to start with.
Yeah.
But realizing these kinds of things can actually allow you to break out of those types of cycles.
Yeah.
Because, well, again, I believe everything's very deterministic and you don't necessarily have any free will. At any point in time, any kind of catalyst can come along and basically send you down another path.
Yep.
And as long as you're willing, and, you know, hopefully if you hear this gives you that ability to be willing to just kind of let that positive alternate route take you, then, I mean, you can do almost anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like another thing that kind of came to mind in some of this discussion is the placebo effect.
Yeah.
The placebo effect is very real. There have been tons and tons and tons of studies on it. it is absolutely amazing what the brain is capable of doing if it is convinced of something.
Yeah.
Like if you have no way of knowing the difference, and somebody that you trust as an authority, like a doctor, just hands you a pill and says, you know, this pill is going to be effective. Like, this pill is going to make everything better. It's going to get rid of whatever. Like, if you actually believe that, if you actually think that this is going to make everything better, then plain sugar pills, which generally referred to as placebos, placebo effect placebos.
Yeah.
Like, just sugar pills don't have any kind of chemicals, anything. Like, it's just basically a fake pill, like, can still have the desired effect just because the person believes that it will. And on the flip side, there's something called the nocebo effect, which is basically the opposite. Like, if you believe that something is not going to work, then it won't. Like, if you for some reason think that this drug isn't good enough, or you think, well, I've been given a placebo, they're not giving me the real drug. Like, it can counteract any effect that you might have off of the drug. And I mean, granted, especially with some people, it takes a pretty extreme amount of belief in it, but it is definitely something that the brain can do. I mean, you hear about things like hysterical pregnancies, like women who are so entirely convinced that they're pregnant that their body starts exhibiting symptoms of pregnancy. Like, they actually start getting around their belly, like things like that. Their periods actually stop. Like,
oh, wow.
Like, their body is behaving as if they were pregnant.
Jeez.
Like, it's crazy stuff what the brain can actually do if it really thinks something is happening.
Yeah.
I mean, and after all, I mean, the brain controls all of your bodily functions.
Yeah, it does.
Even if you can't consciously change anything about it, even if you can't consciously tell your brain to do something with your body, like, your brain controls it all. So if your brain thinks something is happening, it's going to take all of the steps to try and make that thing happen, or whatever it's supposed to do when that thing is happening.
Yeah.
Like, that's why you get stuff like phantom limb syndrome. Like, people who lose limbs, like, they can still feel the limb because the brain's still firing off like it was there. So, I mean, when it comes down to it, like, there is so very much that your brain has control of, that your brain does. And I want to kind of separate, like, your consciousness from your brain. Because, I mean, in a way, like, your consciousness is kind of just a amalgamation of a bunch of the various thoughts and processes that your brain is putting out. Like, in a way, it's almost like an illusion.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I was reading something earlier about how, like, everybody sees the world differently. Like, their brains, their mind, like, predicts, or not predicts.
Well, yeah. I mean, even when you see something, like, the way that you see, like, isn't really just like, oh, well, you know, it's out there in the picture, it just comes through my eye. It's actually just countless bits of light that are being collected by your eye, and in your brain, it kind of rearranges all of it and puts it together into the image that you see.
Yeah, and, like, everybody has, like, a different interpretation. That's the word I was looking for. Everybody has their own interpretation of how their mind puts everything together.
Absolutely. And I mean, it all, again, comes down to perspective. I mean, you know, if you see something out of the corner of your eye, like, your brain can run rampant with what it thought it saw.
Yeah.
And there is almost nothing that you're going to do to convince your brain otherwise, because your brain is basically going to just show you that image.
Yeah. And mine are pretty crazy.
Well, and you know, to some extent, like, that's probably a large part of what the hallucinations associated with schizophrenia
Oh, yeah,
are.
I'm sure. Yeah.
But I mean, it happens to everyone.
Yeah.
Like, just usually not on that kind of scale.
Yeah. Yeah.
But where you know, you hear all of these stories and legends about mythical creatures and all this other kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, in most cases, it was just somebody saw something that didn't really get a good enough look at what it was. And, you know, to them, well, this is what it was. Like, this is what I saw. I absolutely saw this. It couldn't have been anything else.
Yeah. Like manticores, or like old school Bigfoots.
Yeah. And, if you've ever been walking around in the woods, especially at night, you can definitely understand how somebody could think that somebody was out there, especially like just some random, huge, hairy, human looking thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's so many little things moving, like the wind rustling through trees and seeing a bunch of leaves moving. If you just see like the right formation of leaves moving at the right time, like you could absolutely think you just saw like a humanoid walking behind a tree somewhere.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think in a lot of these cases, it really does just come from, a trick of the mind.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, the brain doesn't know everything. It just tries to make as much sense as it can out of the things that it has.
Yeah. Going back to the placebo, nocebo stuff, I think a lot, because I'm not medicated, but I have ways that I cope with my schizophrenia, hallucinations, delusions, all that kind of stuff. I go through my own process that I've figured out over time. But with the medications early on, when I was going through all the trials with the medications, I was having negative side effects to everything, like just worse than what it was helping with. And I do wonder like how much of like newer trials that I've done of medication since then, like how much of those are just my mind has already made it up that the medicine's going to have terrible effects on me, and they're not actually doing it, but my mind is making it happen.
And it's very possible. Unfortunately, it's going to be extremely hard to say one way or the other.
Yeah.
Like most of the time, like you can actually tell like placebo and nocebo effects in contained like experimentation, where they actually do have a control group that is just taking a placebo. And then they know, hey, if they say they have any of these effects, they're not.
Yeah.
Like that's all in their mind. But like when you have somebody that's actually taking a live version of the drug, it's almost impossible to say what's an actual effect and what's like a placebo type effect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although you kind of touched on something else that I think is very interesting. The placebo effect doesn't necessarily just have to adhere to medicine or drugs. Like any routine or anything that you have that you're doing intending to do something, like, oh, well, I go through this process and this process always, makes this problem feel better. Like I don't feel as bad. Or rituals whenever you're going to perform like in sports or something. Like a lot of athletes have like a ritual that they perform.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways that can actually help a lot in putting them in the right mindset, or actually, getting things to go the way that they want, because it kind of centers your mind in the right place. And for that matter, the placebo effect itself can actually be a placebo effect. Like for example, there have been studies that have actually studied the effect of like the placebo effect when people are specifically told, we are giving you a placebo, and like we believe, like, the placebo effect, that if you really believe that this pill is going to fix this, that it will fix it. And again, like this is kind of crazy, but if you have enough faith that placebo effect is going to kick in and fix the problem, it can fix the problem. Because again, it's whatever the brain thinks. It's what the brain is convinced will happen.
Yeah.
And the brain absolutely hates being wrong.
Yeah.
So it will do everything in its power to make sure that it's right.
I think that's basically what happened with me smoking is I mean, well, there is negative effects from smoking and everything, but like I didn't care for the longest time. I just didn't care. I just wanted to quit to save money. Ultimately, I mean, I'm happy I did for my health, but at the time I just wanted to save money and not spend money on cigarettes all the time. I knew that I liked the taste of it. I knew that I liked smoking. I knew I liked the feel of it, but then I made myself not even, and I didn't take any patches or gum or anything like that. I just quit cold turkey by convincing myself that it was disgusting.
Right. And some people have a lot of trouble doing that.
Yeah.
But it absolutely works. Like it can work, I guess, is maybe a better way of saying it.
And it's not like, I I see it a lot on Thanks I'm Cured subreddit or on schizophrenia. People are like, oh, just smile. Oh, you're depressed? Just smile. No, I'm not talking about that. That's dumb.
To some extent, it has a little bit of logic behind it.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that, if you just smile, it'll be all fine.
No.
Because, I mean, while smiling can kind of elicit more happy thoughts, it's definitely not like enough for a lot of people.
Yeah. And it's definitely not.
There are a lot of people out there that are very practiced in smiling when they don't mean it.
Oh, yeah. As a schizophrenic and other schizophrenics out there, like it's talked about in the forums and everything is we're really good at faking being normal. Well, a lot of the times when we're forced into certain situations, we've learned how to be normal.
Well, because it's learned, because ultimately you don't want to have to go through all of the hassle of dealing with it. So it's easier to just act like you're normal and just ignore that it's there. Like,
yeah, but it takes a lot. It takes a lot out of you to pretend to be happy and normal and everything like that. I'll use the wedding party that we had.
Right.
Me and my wife, we had a wedding party. You were there, had family there on her side, my side.
Mm-hmm.
And I barely remember a lot of it. Like I remember some things about it, but a lot of it, it's just a big blur because apparently I was walking around and talking to people and laughing and smiling, everything like that. And like, that drained me. Like I couldn't do shit for like the next week or so other than like a few things here and there. But I was in bed most of the week after that.
And, I think a lot of what it is that whenever you're trying to, put on a face like that, the reason why it ends up being so draining is because you have to be that much more aware of everything else that's going on.
Yeah.
Because you can't just, act like you're happy. Like you have to be aware of how people are looking at you, like how people are reacting, like adjusting. Because, anytime you're pretending, it's so much more work to make sure that it's accurate than it is to just be happy.
Yeah. Like I said, we're not all schizophrenics. Everybody has their own thing going on. No one schizophrenic is the same as another. But there's similarities. But we're really good at pretending. Really good.
Right. And it's again, mind just everywhere on these kinds of things.
You're fine.
Now, I want to backtrack just a bit to, like, what you're saying about, just smiling and everything. Now, maybe not about, like, countering depression, but, something I actually learned in the service industry, like, tons and tons of years ago at this point. And, I still will do this to some extent, like, because, I still have to sometimes talk to people on the phone with my job. And I still find it to be absolutely true. Generally speaking, especially in service, it helps if you actually smile when you're talking to someone on the phone.
You sound cheerful.
And that sounds maybe a bit ridiculous to a lot of people, I'm sure.
I mean, I was told the same thing when I was in the customer service industry.
But you naturally sound more cheerful when you're actually smiling.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the difference between just talking like this and smiling and actually talking like this.
Yeah. I hated my life, but I sounded cheerful.
I mean, when you smile and say that you hate your life, people maybe don't believe it as much.
Yeah.
But, I could keep going forever on this.
Oh, yeah.
But unfortunately, we'll have to cut it here for now. We may come back to this at some point or some similar, just deep, unrelated topic.
Yeah, we don't have free will. Like, we got a time constraint.
This is true. And if we come back to it, that'll be because we were going to come back to it the whole time.
Yep.
But thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoyed it. And hope you come back next week when we have something more to talk about. Something more to podcast.
You're doing it now.
Yeah, I'm doing it now. It's because you implanted that like months ago. No, but hope you join us next week when we have something more to podcast.